It's been several days since the Chinese astronauts became stranded in orbit. So how are they holding up now? Does China's space agency have a plan to bring them back soon? Or could SpaceX possibly step in with a rescue? First, for those who haven't followed closely, here's a quick recap. When the Shenzhou 21 crew arrived at China's Tiangong Space Station on November 1st, the Shenzhou 20 trio, Commander Chen Dong, Operator Chen Zhongrui, and Science Officer Wang Jie, helped the newcomers get settled into microgravity life. On November 4th, they officially transferred command of the station to the new team. After that, Shenzhou 20 was expected to wrap up its mission the next day, November 5th. But that morning, the China Manned Space Agency, CMSA, announced that the return would be delayed. Their statement read, "The Shenzhou 20 crewed spacecraft is suspected to have been struck by a small piece of orbital debris, and an impact analysis and risk assessment are now in progress. To guarantee the astronauts' safety and ensure the mission's success, the return of Shenzhou 20, originally scheduled for November 5th, will be postponed." Since then, Chen, and Wang have remained aboard Tiangong on a lighter routine. Fewer experiments and less maintenance than in the months since their April launch. With both crews aboard, the station's life support system can sustain 6 astronauts for several weeks. Supplied by the Tianzhou 9 cargo craft and the newly arrived Shenzhou 21. After 6 days of silence, a long-awaited update finally arrived. On November 11th, the CMSA released a fresh statement about the crew's status. Following the delay of the Shenzhou 20 return mission, officials said the team had immediately activated emergency protocols following the principle of life first, safety first. They conducted full-scale simulation tests, safety reviews, and structural assessments of the Shenzhou 20 spacecraft, along with verification of every system involved in the return sequence. Engineers organized product quality checks and coordinated landing site rehearsals to ensure readiness for the crew's eventual return. According to the agency, all tasks were progressing steadily, and in an orderly manner, Tiangong systems were reported to be operating normally and able to support both crews without issue. The astronauts aboard Shenzhou 20 were said to be in good health, living and working normally, and continuing joint science projects with the Shenzhou 21 team. It's reassuring to hear they're safe and stable up there. Still, the CMSA's update avoided clarifying what exactly went wrong. Based on known debris impact risk, the sections of the station facing forward, in orbit, are most vulnerable, meaning the service module of Shenzhou 21, which holds its main engines, takes the brunt of exposure. For Shenzhou 20, all 3 of its modules could be at risk. So if it was indeed hit, damage might range from a small leak in the orbital module to scorching of the reentry shield or harm to the propulsion system. Reading between the lines, it sounds like the Shenzhou 20 astronauts will still be returning to Earth in their own craft once safety checks are complete. Since November 5th, engineers have been running ongoing tests and reviews, but no conclusions have yet been shared publicly. The CMSA also mentioned that both the Shenzhou 20 and Shenzhou 21 teams are working together smoothly, with Tiangong fully supporting all 6 astronauts. Supplies remain plentiful thanks to the Tianzhou 9 cargo ship and Shenzhou 21's fresh delivery run. As for when Shenzhou 20 will actually head home, that remains uncertain. Currently, there have been no new launch notices from the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center following CAS Space's Kinetic 1 and Galactic Energy's Series 1 missions earlier in the week. Things there appear quiet. Likewise, there's been no official recovery notice for Shenzhou 20, although landing rehearsals are reportedly still underway. Naturally, it didn't take long for Western space enthusiasts to start suggesting a SpaceX rescue mission. It wouldn't be the first time that ideas floated around. Earlier this year, former U.S. President Donald Trump famously told Elon Musk to go get the crew of Boeing's Starliner spacecraft, who he claimed had been practically abandoned by the current administration. Musk played along, and ironically, that story ended with astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams safely coming home aboard a SpaceX Crew Dragon in March 2025. A similar situation unfolded back in 2022 when a Soyuz capsule at the ISS was damaged by a micrometeoroid. Russia eventually launched an uncrewed replacement ship, but NASA briefly considered using a SpaceX Dragon as a backup. So, could SpaceX actually step in to rescue the Chinese astronauts this time? Realistically, not quite. The next Crew Dragon flight isn't scheduled until around March or April 2026 for NASA's Crew 12 mission to the ISS, followed by another private launch for Vast Space Station in June 2026. One of those would need to be delayed or reassigned just to free up a spacecraft. SpaceX doesn't have spare Dragons sitting on the pad ready for rescue duty. Then there's the docking issue. Despite rumors that China copied the docking hardware used by SpaceX and the ISS, that's not really accurate. While the international docking standards are public, China's exact implementation is different, meaning Crew Dragon probably can't connect to Tiangong. What about a spacewalk transfer? In 2024, SpaceX proved Crew Dragon could support EVA operations when Jared Isaacman exited through the nose hatch, but China's launch suits aren't rated for spacewalks. Tiangong's Phaetian EVA suits, meanwhile, aren't designed to interface with SpaceX systems and likely wouldn't fit through Dragon's hatch anyway. If Shenzhou 20 truly can't make the trip home, the more realistic solution would be to launch Shenzhou 22 as a replacement craft. In that case, China's backup plan would roll out in a very specific sequence. First, Shenzhou 22 and its Long March 2F rocket would be prepared, tested, and rolled out to the launch pad. Meanwhile, the uncrewed Shenzhou 20 would detach from Tiangong and drift safely away from the station. Once clear, Shenzhou 22 would launch without a crew and dock to Tiangong's Earth-facing port on the Tianhe core module. After docking, the Shenzhou 21 crew would move their mission materials and personal gear into Shenzhou 22, while the Shenzhou 20 astronauts would shift their remaining items into Shenzhou 21. Then, the Shenzhou 20 crew would depart Tiangong aboard Shenzhou 21, returning safely to Earth. The Shenzhou 21 team would stay in orbit with the newly arrived Shenzhou 22. A new backup spacecraft and rocket would then be prepped as quickly as possible to restore emergency coverage. This entire procedure has existed since the Shenzhou 12 mission, but has never been used, a standby Long March 2F/G, and Shenzhou are always kept ready at the Jiuquan launch site, typically arriving a couple of months before the backup period begins. If needed, that backup system could be ready to launch in just over 8 days and reach Tiangong within 3 to 7 hours after liftoff. Still, based on the CMSA's latest updates, it seems unlikely such a rescue operation will be necessary this time. This incident, coming less than a year after SpaceX's rescue of the Boeing crew, underscores two major challenges in modern spaceflight. First, we need standardized systems that would allow for emergency cooperation between agencies, even across nations. And second, we can't keep ignoring the growing danger of orbital debris. Both of these recent events happened while astronauts were docked to space stations, meaning they had a safe place to wait while a plan was formed, but many private missions don't have that luxury. Those free flyer crews depend on their own limited supplies, and if something fails, help has to come fast. That's why more experts are calling for an international space rescue network, a system flexible enough to use existing vehicles like Crew Dragon or any compatible spacecraft to respond quickly to emergencies. Another takeaway from this incident is simple but urgent. We have to deal with space junk. The amount of debris in orbit is reaching critical levels. We've been launching satellites since the 1950s, starting with Sputnik, and now tens of thousands of them circle the planet. All that activity has created a cloud of debris that's not only dangerous, but even adds to light pollution. Think of it this way. Imagine tossing a trash bag out your front door every day instead of taking it to the bin. Eventually, the pile would grow so big you couldn't even leave your house. That's basically what's happening in Earth's orbit. The more junk we leave up there, the harder it becomes to launch and operate safely. As of April 2025, The European Space Agency estimated that more than 40,000 artificial objects are currently being tracked around Earth. And that's only the large ones. Even tiny fragments just a few millimeters wide can punch holes in spacecraft or knock them off course. This is what scientists call the Kessler syndrome. The idea that one collision could trigger a domino chain of more collisions, each creating even more debris. In the worst case scenario, some orbits could become so crowded and unstable that launching or operating new satellites there might be impossible for decades. So, how do we fix this? One creative idea actually came from SpaceX. Back in 2021, Elon Musk suggested using Starship to collect space debris. He even joked on X, "We can fly Starship around space and scoop up junk with the moving fairing door." Here's how that concept might actually work. According to the Starship user guide, its payload fairing, basically the large shell that carries satellites, can open and close like a clamshell. Normally, that's used to release cargo into orbit. But in a debris cleanup mode, Starship could open the fairing, sweep through debris fields, and trap junk inside before sealing up for the return trip. It's kind of like how whales feed. Humpbacks glide through swarms of krill with their mouths open, then close them once they've caught enough. Starship's fairing has an internal volume of around 1,100 cubic meters, large enough to hold objects up to 8 times the size of a Crew Dragon capsule, trunk included. The concept of a Pac-Man-style Starship gobbling up debris is pretty amazing, but also very experimental. It'd work best for big junk, like dead satellites or rocket parts. But for smaller fragments, the cost and effort might not be worth it. Those bits are harder to track, and locating them precisely enough to capture would be a major challenge. So what do you think of that idea? If SpaceX actually started cleaning up orbit, most of what they'd be removing would belong to other nations or companies. And it's hard to imagine Russia or China being thrilled about Elon Musk hauling their old satellites back to Earth.